and my name is Judy. I don't like talking about myself, so I will remain a mystery. I'm actually going to be a UX director at MSNBC. That's my official title. So I'm going to go sit over here, but pretty much we're going to try to focus on the future of wearables. I'm sure we'll talk about what's going on right now, the Apple Watch, etc. But we really want to get into what's coming, what's to look forward to, and the many different applications that are business-driven and strategic to story-driven, and then just cultural impacts as well. And I think we're striving to have something that's semi-structured, but if people have questions, please feel free to ask. I'm okay with that. I'm assuming the panelists are too. So yeah, I'm going to sit over here. And I'd like to just start with, what do you guys see for wearables in the future, and what is the most interesting thing going on right now in terms of wearables?
Well, I'll jump in. So we decided on our roles for the panel, and I'm going to be the crazy academic provocateur. So what I'm hoping is going to happen is that we see wearables evolve from right now it's like I'm wearing something and it's probably sensing something about my body or my context, and switching more toward the true vision of wearable computing, which is where the devices become kind of instinctually part of you, your body, your life, and they're there supporting you, anticipating your needs, augmenting your abilities, assisting your abilities, kind of giving you these like superhuman powers. And in a way, when I use my mobile device, it's very intentional. I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to take this out, I'm going to unlock it, blah, blah, blah. But what if instead it's truly this instinctual interface that I'm not even thinking, it's like me swinging a golf club or riding a bicycle, that I'm just kind of one with the device. So that's what I'm hoping will happen.
Was I supposed to be the curmudgeon?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
You're wrong.
It's really interesting. I want to note any wearables amongst the panelists right now?
Mechanical technology.
Mechanical wearable, yeah. Well, this is wearable, but
Yep.
wearable technology.
That's the first
But
one.
does anybody have, just hold up your wrist if you got a wrist-worn device. Oh, there are some devices. Good. Double wrists there. Good. I just want to see kind of just what's going on. Sorry, Mr. Curmudgeon, go ahead.
Oh yeah, curmudgeon. So I think there's going to be some good and bad things, and I know we're talking about the future and not the present, but I think it's actually hard to talk about the present because I think we're still in the beginning throes of wearable disruption and still trying to figure out what's going to happen and what's happening now. What's on my mind professionally is how to meet wearable technology for the sake of storytelling. And we're beginning to approach that in two ways. One is actually combating wearables, and specifically wearable distraction, and that's the bad part. And we see that with cell phones now, and now we have campaigns about don't text while driving that was not even around like 10 years ago. So we're going to see new stuff come up and new annoyances that weren't there before. And then the second one is actually embracing wearables, and specifically as an environmental sensor and also a canvas to tell stories with. So that's the exciting part, at least for me. Is what do we? So if say second story instruments or responsive environment space, whether it be in a museum or a store, people walk in with different wearable technologies. Can we piggyback on that and use those sensors in the environment, and then take those sensors, process it, and influence it either through generative art or some sort of brand messaging or storytelling?
That's good. I feel like there's just that beginning sense of how different wearables are from the technologies that have come before, and I think technology companies have been producing, right, a lot of the devices that people are wearing and held up. And those won't be the only companies to produce those kinds of things. Wearables are very different from hardware that sits mostly off in your home. It isn't always visible to the outside world. You don't get to use it to express some part of you and your personality, your identity as a person. But wearables will be very different. And I think we were talking a little bit before the panel started about the collaborations. So you've seen like Apple and Hermes, or you've seen like, hey, Google Glass with Diane von Fosterberg. Those collaborations are amateurish. At least today, I think when you think about like the cutting edge, the state of the art today, that feels really amateurish to me. And I want to see new kinds of companies grow up to build new kinds of wearables, right? It won't just be the service, the system, the thing that's on you or in you or on the helmet you wear all the time. But it'll be built by a company that doesn't really exist quite yet.
Well, and yeah, you make a good point that, we had this jump when we went from kind of desktop computing applications to like smartphones. And for a while you would see companies that kind of didn't know what to do. They would like try to take their desktop app and like put it on the phone, and that was the wrong idea. But it's 100 times that when we're talking about going from mobile device to wearable. It's probably completely different types of applications, completely different types of user experiences that are going to be required. So it's like, yeah, new companies, new types of expertise that's needed. And I mean, I've had companies recently coming to me saying, hey, we have an Android app, like we just want to put it on Google Glass. And it's like, well, that is a mistake. Like, that's not what you want to be doing at all. You need to start from the ground up.
I think there are some similarities in smartphone that we can sort of, we can sort of guess what's going to happen. So if your smartphone basically does everything that your laptop or your desktop does, right? Well, the only difference is I can actually walk around with it, carry it around. I can download an app and have that augment a physical experience that's happening. I can download the Walmart app and go into Walmart and self-check out, find out more about products. I'm hoping wearables will sort of do the same thing, will augment the physical experience.
Quick stat for you, 12% of Walmart's e-commerce that they do every year is done on handheld devices in stores, inside the stores that Walmart has. That's a common use case. That's hundreds of millions of dollars. Just.
Because the pricing is better
That's right.
But you want to have that tangible experience of like, how big is that thing? What does it feel like? How absolutely.
Is this for sure in their own stores, or could it be in other stores?
No, the stat I heard was it's in their own stores. I will try to cite it for you. Let me get my wearable and find out how to.
See, if you were using a wearable, you'd already have it.
Exactly.
Because it would have known what you were looking for and it would have brought it.
Mary Beth was a student with me at Georgia Tech, and there's a guy there named Thad Starner, and all of his students had their sort of proto Google Glass kinds of devices. They were wearing these wearable computers with head-mounted displays back at 2001, 2, 3, 4. And they would do things like that all the time in lectures. Like some guest lecturer would come from some big name school and he'd be talking or she'd be talking, and then someone said, actually in 1996, I was going to actually ask you a quick question about a paper that you put. It's like, how are you doing this? Like they were literal cyborgs in your class with you. It's very disconcerting.
Well, and to explain the picture up there, so Thad was the tech lead on Google Glass, and this is one of maybe the first Google Glass prototype where they wanted to test out the experience part of it. Oh, wow. And so to do that, they just glued phones to a headband so they could test the experience of like the interactions of swiping and having the camera on the front without really having to build anything special. So that's why that looks so crazy.
I know we just talked about how currently everything is still new. We're still learning what this actually means in terms of the user experiences, but are there user experiences that exist right now that you think are compelling, that you think are novel, that you think are really interesting, that you can't wait to see like the future versions of? Or is everything still pretty new and simple? Is there anything that you guys have seen?
I'll go first. I've got one that I just think it's funny because like I don't like the technology, so there are plenty of things I think that are wrong with this, that are UX weird or whatever. But I'm really interested in Ringly, and in this new thing I just read about. It literally launched this week called Jemmy. There are these wearables made for women, young women. Ringly is a ring, and Jemmy makes this like augmented and smart bracelet. So it's not intending to be a watch. It's intending to be a piece of jewelry. And I think in both cases, those are interesting to me because they're very right from the perspective where women are not served by today's wearables very well, especially wrist-worn wearables, right? They are not feminine. They don't express maybe the right things about certain women, right, who want to wear that and look a certain way or have that go with a certain outfit.
Physically fit on your
or
wrist.
physically actually fit your person. those challenges are not being addressed, right? And I think that now you're starting to see wearables sort of come into people's lives in the way, right, that they will become a much deeper part, right, of life. And that sort of, they'll recede into the background because they're like the things you have now, but they're smarter, right?
Well, and I'm blanking on the name, but there was a Kickstarter for these wearable bracelets for like tweens, and they were all about fun. It was supposed to be about social connection, and you can program them to turn different colors when your friends come in the room. Anyone here that has been a preteen girl knows that that is a terrible idea because it's going to be used to be mean. Like, you come in the room and all the mean girls, like, ew, hers turned black, because we don't like her. Like, sure. And I've talked to a lot of women about this, and we all have the same reaction, like, oh my God, like,
it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, a way of advertising who's friends with each other in middle school, like, so.
Integrate that with people.
But I think that's what's fun about wearables is, like, of course there's like really meaty computing and technology problems. But then there's all these aspects of design and user experience and social issues and public policy, and so there's a lot of one as well.
And to me, I'm most personally excited by social as well as art. There's one organization called Sensory. They're actually making emotive clothing, so clothing that displays your emotion in beautiful artistic ways. Hopefully, one day to the point of enabling empathy in social environments, which I think would be pretty cool. We've actually experimented we've made interactive badges for conferences before, badges that are aware of other badges to measure conversation and collaboration at a conference. And you can start to measure like different connections that are made. We've also used it for spatial storytelling. We did, this is probably my favorite one that we've done. There was an event in New York where the audience takes these headphones that we made through Bluetooth. The headphones are spatially aware. You walk over to certain actors that are planted in the environment, and you hear bits of a science fiction story start to play out as you go and find these different actors in the environment. So I think using it for social situations, art, spatial storytelling, stuff like that, I'm really excited about it, less so than the commercial aspects.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of like, I don't know, what's coming in like a year or two? Are you guys forecasting in your specific jobs? If so, I'm sure you're thinking about that all the time.
Well, I've been doing augmented reality research for 15 plus years, which the other picture is me in one of our AR systems from many years ago. I'm excited that head-mounted displays are finally becoming a consumer product because, like, the AR community has been this really, active research field for 20 plus years, but we could never deploy anything. And when the smartphones came out, we could start doing, some of the kind of AR things you're talking about, like it's kind of like a smart window you're looking through, and that's cool. But there's so many awesome things we can do with head-mounted displays, but it used to be that no one could buy them, and they weren't very good because not a lot of R&D had gone into them. Now, I think there's a lot of pitfalls that that's another domain where I think we're going to have to totally rethink, like, what is entertainment on a head-mounted display versus like on a TV. I think it's going to be a big difference, but I think head-mounted displays are going to become a lot more common, both the immersive ones that maybe you're using in your living room and the kind of less immersive, kind of monocular ones like Google Glass that you can use to support your as you do your work and such. So I think that's coming, and I think it's going to enable a lot of like really useful productivity type applications, but also new types of entertainment.
We've actually had a lot of recent conversations we do a lot of work for museums. So conversations with museums, and you think a lot of museums are destinations, right? Hopefully, if it's a good museum. So we've talked to them about making Google Cardboard apps where people can virtually visit the museum if they can't fly to the museum and see it. Also making, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, and it's something we'll have to test, but perhaps making a Google Cardboard app to augment the physical experience. So imagine going into a historical room at the Biltmore, and you hold it up for 10 seconds or so, and you see sort of a reenactment along with sound. Similar to the same experience when you have an audio device and a headphone as you go and key in the number, if you've ever done that in experience. But something dealing with sight as well. You just got to be careful there. That's why it's counterintuitive. You can't be walking around with it. You got to have a designated spot to maybe sit down, take it in for 20 seconds, and then put it back. So just like a viewfinder you put up and put down.
I mean, yeah, I feel like we're starting to see some of the industrial and commercial kind of downsides to wearables. So you think about like every UPS driver is highly instrumented, right? There's that big pad that you sign when you get the package. So when they carry that around, right, that's tracked and sensed, and they're looking at the accelerometer. They're watching, right, what happens on that device. And I think that is interesting, and I think you're going to start to see more questions, both societal, legal, and organizational, right, about who needs wearables and for what, and then who gets the data and how that data works. I think that's just an interesting topic.
And
I think
can make you wear one?
And will they make you wear one? Will they make people who are runners at the Amazon warehouse, will they make runners wear devices? And then is that actually legal? And I think we'll start to see that in the next sort of 1 to 2 year time frame.
You're talking about the tracking, right? What all is tracked and how often someone or some behavior is tracked?
Well, or, even the next step beyond that, Zach was talking about THAAD students back years ago wearing, it was called the Remembrance Agent. So it's just a very simple text-based thing that was looking up relevant information, like while you're having a conversation. So, you and I talk about some scientist, and I suddenly remember everything about them.
She makes it sound so simple and easy.
Right. But
so natural.
So that's a simple cognitive prosthetic. What if I go to work somewhere and they tell me, well, we all use this here because, it makes us perform better on the job. So you need to augment yourself with this. I mean, there's also what's coming along soon is physical augmentation. If I work at the Amazon distribution center, do I have to wear like this exoskeleton thing? And, so there's two questions. Can I wear it? Like, what if I'm someone with a disability and this kind of brings me up to a normal level? What if I'm using it to extend my abilities? We've already seen this show up with the Olympics with Oscar Pistorius, the sprinter. He's using prosthetic legs, and there was this court battle over whether the legs were better than what his natural legs would have been, and how much he was allowed to augment himself. And so I think we're going to get into some territory that we've never been in before about augmenting ourselves and how we feel about technology becoming really tightly connected with our physical selves.
Like an extension of someone's
Right.
body and identity. Right.
But the example I always use is like, I can go into the SAT and wear glasses, because it's like, oh, well, her vision is below, 20/20, so she can improve it with glasses. Can I wear a cognitive prosthetic and take the SAT? And a lot of people will be like, what? No, that's cheating. Like, what's cheating and what's normal?
Sure. And then, I don't know if you guys know, but there's a couple cognitive prosthetics that are already out, like the Focus, like all these funny headbands. And they use, I had to look up the name of the company, but they use direct current, basically. They just put more electricity near your brain, and that will make your brain work faster. And of course, right, the one thing they picked to solve is not SATs or helping nuclear physicists do better and win better Nobel Prizes. They picked video gamers killing people in virtual worlds, and then literally you buy it, and you go to the website for Focus, and it's gaming, and that's the application that they picked to solve.
Well, it's smart because it's innocuous. People aren't going to get upset about
exactly. That. SAT is a little more, scary.
See, and we had something similar in our lab the other day, but where my head was at was just connecting it to LED lighting and just having it control LED lights in our artistic way.
That's also, good.
But our parent company, Sapien Nitro, they actually got a lot of press at the Cannes Lions a few months ago. They made a curated loft with, it's actually a store, so with products that you could virtually shop from anywhere in the world as long as you had a headset. It was a concept, and they got a lot of press by it, but it made a lot of sense. And even myself as a consumer, I have maybe 2 or 3 brands that I'm really passionate about. And if I was in New York City and I could go to the flagship store, I totally would. But sometimes I really go to New York, so I would love to put on something and just kind of shop around the store for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Why not?
I'd like to open it to you guys, actually. Do you have questions?
or just thoughts that you have about wearables and experiences, the merging of both. Like I said, I wanted to just be a casual conversation.
Yes.
Well, a question, more comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So I work with people that live with severe diseases, like Parkinson's and epilepsy and things like that, and we explore wearables, to help them augment or to help them connect with one another better. And one of the interesting things, is that just like you were describing, there is a somewhat like resistance to it. It comes down to safety. It comes down to, oh my goodness, who's going to get my data? And is my doctor going to know I'm having a beer when I shouldn't be? How do we reconcile that, The need to kind of augment ourselves within this kind of privacy, safety, legality kind of piece of it. I mean, have you guys experienced that in some of the work y'all have done?
I was thinking very long terms and conditions.
Yeah. That you can only read on the tiny screen.
Exactly.
Well, so a lot of wearable research is in the domain of disability and assistive technology because it's kind of the tip of the sword. Solving problems for someone who has a hearing impairment or a mobility impairment, oftentimes those solutions are really applicable to the general public, but you have a very willing set of participants. So a lot of people in here, if I said, hey, put on all this crazy gear, you'd be reticent because it wouldn't provide that much value. But if it's gonna let you live in your home instead of assisted living, if it's gonna let you have a job, if it's gonna let you have a social life, you're sure, experiment on me. So that's where a lot of the really cutting edge work is happening, is with that user group. But then like you're saying, privacy is even more important. Maybe I have something that is helping me be assisted due to some impairment, and I go get a job. Maybe I don't want my coworkers to know that I have this disability, and
that's a giant one. You don't want to wear a thing that kind of gives you more stigma than you already.
Absolutely. And of course, another solution is if it's universal, if instead we're all using wearables for lots of different reasons, you wouldn't know that I'm using it because I have diabetes, and you're using it because you like to play games, and
Are there any other questions?
I heard you mention AR, and a lot of the tech podcasts and so forth talk about virtual reality, VR. Is there a difference, or is it the same thing?
They are totally different, in my opinion. Well, so the goal of virtual reality is to transport you to a completely synthetic environment. It doesn't necessarily have to be for gaming, but where you need to be in this completely synthetic world. AR is about bringing the digital content into the physical world with you. So for me, because that's what I did my PhD in, AR is much more interesting because you're out in the world interacting with physical things and real people and real spaces, but you're adding just enough stuff for whatever purpose. Whenever we're describing AR to people, we first talk about the virtual first down line in football, when you're watching live football. And now they do even more stuff, all kinds of things on the field. And it's beautifully done. It's visually integrated into the physical scene. You don't even think to yourself, hey, that's synthetic and that's real. It provides more utility than a more traditional presentation. If you put, the next down is at the 25-yard line, that's not as useful as seeing it in space. So I get excited by AR applications where there's this real tight integration between the physical and the virtual. But VR is fun too. I mean, especially for, where you want to transport someone to another location or another, a completely fictional place, or put them in a circumstance that they could never be in, or maybe they wouldn't actually want to be in. But yes, to me, they're very different.
To that point, it seems like VR has much more of an impact on the consumer from a consumer product side. Like Facebook didn't buy into AR years ago, but they are buying into VR now heavily with Oculus. So to me as a consumer, it feels like VR is kind of leading?
Well, first off, you can do AR with an Oculus headset. I mean, that's what I use in my lab to do AR experiences with. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird because VR has been on the outs for so long. Like, VR really fell out of favor. It got a lot of hype, like in the 80s and 90s, and Jaron Lanier and all these people are like, oh, we're going to be transported into Snow Crash. And then it didn't really happen. And like people that did VR research kind of moved to other fields. And AR had a big spike like a couple of years ago when you started being able to do it, on these things. I don't know if one is like leading the other. I think there's a lot more AR applications that are out there that consumers are using. VR is a lot more heavyweight. I mean, not only do you need the head mount, I mean, you need tracking. The content creation is a lot more onerous. I mean, look at how long it takes to create like a AAA game title with all that 3D modeling and texturing. And whereas I can make a cool AR app, like the kind of things you're describing, I go in a museum, it could actually be some very simple content, very elegantly designed and integrated with the physical world. It'd be much easier to create and deploy. And I think it's often more compelling when the content is really part of the physical experience. But it's not like one is better than the other. And I don't know what's going to happen with that Facebook thing we were talking about beforehand. We'll see. I don't know. Facebook's pretty immersive as it is in its current form. I don't know that I need to float around and see 3D avatars.
We'll see, like, they did purchase something like that as a ongoing.
Oh yeah, but is it going to be like something that transforms Facebook? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
I want to know what experts think.
I think that, honestly, the vision he put forth sounded very dated to me. It sounded like that 90s vision of the way we get connected as we go into a virtual analog of the physical world and we fly around and we look at avatars. And I mean, Second Life didn't work. So we'll see. And maybe they have other things in mind. There are other versions of virtual reality other than put me in a completely 3D world. You notice that the VR things you're seeing right now are all this immersive video, which I'm not discounting, though that's cool. But like it's not really VR. I think they're kind of trying to figure out what you can do with these head mounts.
That's not VR to you? That's weird. I mean, because I work.
It's not that interactive.
It's not that interactive, and I think that's very different. And so I think for some of the stuff that I do with startups, I have this startup that I work with, and they're building immersive VR experiences. They've done stuff for the United Nations, right, to take you to a Syrian refugee camp and get toured around by a 12-year-old girl. And it's really powerful stuff. So it raises the little hairs on the back of your neck, I think, in a great way. And I think that's maybe what Mark Zuckerberg is like feeling, right, when you go into those immersive video experiences. Those feel really powerful because they give you a lot of the sort of academic background of like, they give you presence, right? They really put you in that moment. At the same time, they give up a lot of interactivity, right, to give you those immersive storytelling. So you can look around, but there's only one story happening, right? It's not a infinite world, right, where you could explore like a GTA or something.
Like an iPad or something now, where you're consuming really freely.
I feel like the Oculus purchase was I think inspired more by consumption than by interaction or production.
Well, and now I'm going to take the opposite view of what I just said, because I also
take the other side of that argument. Go right ahead.
So, evil Mary Beth that was talking 30 seconds ago was wrong.
Totally wrong.
And because it's also, if you think about it, really silly that all of our like media consumption is about these 2D rectangles, these glowing rectangles. Like, why is that how all content comes to us? Well, that's a byproduct of what technology was invented like 100 years ago. There's no reason that we have to watch things hidden behind this piece of glass in 2D. So I think that there's a whole new world of entertainment and other kinds of content for education and training and stuff that will come out of that screen and is around us in various ways.
Yeah, we're looking at some data that shows some of the, when you give people like interview tips and tricks, or think about, professional skills and like soft skill development for this VR company. And we looked at some data like, hey, if we just sat you down with a real person, right, and they coached you about about the job interview you're going to have, and then what does that look like in a 2D environment? So like, it's a virtual person and you watch it on your laptop or on your tablet versus something that you actually do in VR. And can you actually make a space for virtual reality and training. We've seen a lot of good results from the sports side as well. So some really good case studies. Basically, every NFL quarterback today is being trained in VR because of that situational awareness that you get from a VR headset. You're there, you're the quarterback, so you're standing behind a bunch of guys, and you're going to throw the ball to somebody. So when you pull back into the pocket, if you know football, I don't, so I'll just confess that before anybody asks me any questions, like, tell me more about football. Don't ask me. But when you're there, you need situational awareness. So you need to know who is going to be open. And the only way to learn how to do that is what they used to do is just watch tape, right, on this 2D rectangle. And now they don't. They do that entirely immersively because it's so much more beneficial, right? The quarterbacks learn so much faster and so much more accurately. Oh, how do I read this situation given those snap judgments that need to be made? So I think there's plenty of let's agree, that's a very niche point solution, but I think you're going to start seeing VR being used in ways that are far beyond the sort of immersive content experience. So like, I want to watch a movie, but it's in VR. Mm-hmm. I think you'll start to see that sort of seep into professional life and into everyday life for certain kinds of skills.
I think as a tool is interesting. And we're actually using VR as a tool. So as part of the work we do, we actually have to create and architect a space. So as part of that workflow, we'll actually create 3D models of fixtures. Does that mean?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, it's gone. Yeah, so we'll create 3D models of fixtures and of spaces and of whole rooms that didn't previously exist. So out of that, you have a 3D virtual model, right? That you can instantly plug into an Oculus or a Google Cardboard or whatever you want. And so, like one of our architecture partners that we work with, they design a lot of big retail stores, for instance. They'll actually reuse that model and reskin it as a training application to give to employees. They've done this for a few big brands. So the brand, when they're actually training the store personnel that's going to work there, they just put it on and they take a virtual tour through the store. Little call-outs pop up and say, "Hey, this is where you put this is the drawer where the such and such goes. This is the register. This is how you stock stuff in the back." And they just put it on, or they can actually do it on an iPad or a computer as well. So we also use virtual reality for visualization. We'll sometimes use the Oculus and put it on our client's head. It's kind of a wow factor. And they can actually see what the space that we designed is going to look like before we actually build it. But I've found that it's better, at least where the Oculus is now, to just use projection mapping to do that. So if we're making a wall installation, we'll actually project onto a big wall, and you'll get to see what it looks like. So I mean, tools and training to me is a neat aspect. In terms of just for fun, I mean, go back to the roots of what it is. Virtual reality transports you to another time and place. I think the area that's most ripe to reap the benefits of that is gaming. That's where you're going to see the first huge explosion. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that. It's kind of obvious. In terms of where retailers connect with it and like other things that happen, like think of any place where it would be nice to be transported to another time and place, a place I can't visit or a place that I'm going to visit and I want to get prepared for it. People that can't leave their homes, people that are like more mobile and for some reason can't visit a place or don't have the means to. I think virtual reality can be a low-cost alternative to have a neat experience.
An anecdote that you'll probably appreciate. So a colleague of Zach and mine at Georgia Tech, for his dissertation, did a comparison of how many people have ever played Facade. It's like a indie video game experience. Yeah, so it's very arty. You go to an apartment, it's like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Like you go to this apartment and this couple's fighting, they're supposed to be your friends, and you type in what you want to say to them and they respond using AI, and it's not really a game you win, you get to explore, and you can kind of decide like, ooh, I want to get them to fight, or I want to get them to make up, and you can try to guide the narrative that way. But anyway, he compared the traditional version, which was just on a desktop computer, with an augmented reality version. And so in the AR one, you would go into like a set that looked like this apartment, but there'd be these kind of cartoony people inside of it. But you could move around the space and you actually talked instead of typing. And so he compared a lot of aspects of the two experiences and how they were different. And like people behave totally differently in the two of them. So when people play the desktop one, they type in really ridiculous things. You know, they like say insulting things, they make out with the husband or the wife, you know. They're much more free because there's this distance between them and the narrative. When they were in the AR version, they were clearly more socially present. And so they followed social rules. They tended to say things that were more socially acceptable. What was interesting is when they were asked subjectively, like what they liked, people liked the desktop one more. And, you know, as technologists, we're like, what? I mean, the AR version is so awesome and you got a head-mounted display. Well, it makes sense because you were putting them in an uncomfortable situation. Nobody wants to go have dinner with the fighting couple. So, you know, it was so realistic that they're like, oh, I don't want that.
Back onto that. Yeah, I heard somebody, I heard this on the radio or something, where they were using it to do health experiences that you couldn't actually get into, like get into the mind of someone that had some serious mental health issues, and they would put it on and they'd be like, oh, so this is what it's like. Oh shit, now I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't realize that's what it was like. Now, I mean, that's not necessarily something you want to go into, but it was like, it's cool to experience it, even though it could be horrific. You know?
Well, I wonder how it'll change, you know, the culture of like gamers being so awful to each other. Like if you reach a level of social presence that you're kind of like tentative to interact with each other the way they do currently with, you know, horrible insults and yeah.
Less trigger happy.
Yeah.
Hi, a question for you guys. In Washington Post just ran a very interesting article. They had photographs or paintings from 1915, I think, of what the world would be in 100 years. And it was very interesting to see what they imagined. And some of things came through, some things were obviously enough to go back home, and so on and so forth came through, but others were out there. You guys are big thinkers. Imagine someone does paintings today. What do you think is going to be in 100 years from AR, VR? I don't really care. I mean, you can argue from AR, VR, or whatever. What technologies do you really see or seeing becoming part of our lives in 100 years versus, yeah, nice to have VR?
I'll put on my curmudgeon hat real quick. So I was at dinner the other night with a friend, and he kept, you know, like mid-conversation, I was like, dude, what are you doing? You gotta put your watch away or turn it off or something. So I think we're gonna see a lot of annoying things. People more distracted. If any of us were to be transported 100 years in the future, we'd probably be really annoyed. Another thing, I think you're gonna see VR addiction. People that are gonna be plugged in all the time, addicted to it, and never unplugging. Y'all have any positives?
No, I was going to give my bad answer is like yours. Like I think WALL-E is going to come true. Basically, that's one painting of the future. I think from a positive side, I feel like the work that I've been seeing, not so much in the wearable space, but in that kind of VR space, I think actually does increase people's ability to feel empathy, right, for others, and it actually allows you to walk in other people's shoes in interesting ways. And I think that actually has promise to change the minds of both gamers and non-gamers alike. So I think that's actually very plausible, and I think will be used both for people to spend all their time away from the world, but also I think engage with the world in good ways and in better ways, because of, you know, they could learn in ways that haven't been possible before.
This is reminding me of a quote on Reddit the other day, which was, the quote was, my friend needed to charge, he wanted to use my USB port to charge his cigarette, but I was already using it to charge my book. The future is really stupid. and you know, like, I bet that painting didn't have people charging cigarettes, you know, on portable computers. Yeah, I don't know that we can predict, but I agree with what you guys are saying. Like in Star Trek, if the Star Trek Next Generation holodeck ever happened, our society will be destroyed. I mean, humanity will end a few years later. No one would ever come out of that. We would go in there when we were 12 and we would never come back out. But anyway, real quick, I'll say I think my prediction is there is a blurring between the digital and the physical identity. I think our ability to construct our identity and put forth what we want to those around us is going to change. I mean, even visually, we can imagine a Rainbow's End type future where I can project visually what I want you to see of me, but also I think there's this blurring of am I, user so-and-so from Xbox Live, or am I Mary Beth Gandy, or am I, whoever on Ashley Madison?
I have a 12-year-old son who's addicted to obviously Minecraft videos. And I had an interesting conversation with him was, he said, I wonder, he asked me, well, I think the life is a dream and someone else, we are in someone else's dream. And I looked at it, it's like, wow, how did you reach that conclusion? And I was imagining him watching those videos all the time. Is that the addiction that you guys are talking about, that eventually that we will blur the line completely, where the reality is where it is, we do not know?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for you. I would say, I think people confuse happiness for comfort, and it's very comfortable to sit in your home and not engage with the world. I was just reading some studies about millennials and how they don't want to go to house parties anymore. It's a New York Times article from last week, and they don't want to go to house parties. They're expensive, they're annoying, it's easier to cancel than it ever used to be because you can cancel without actually having to talk to someone. You just cancel via text. But also, millennials don't like that uncomfortableness of going to a party where people might fight, or where people might say something, or people might not like the new jacket that you bought, right? There are all these issues that are in the real world and that you really need to deal with that, let me just say, I believe will bring you ultimately happiness, but that don't necessarily bring you comfort, right? And so I think part of the addiction issue is if you always go to idealized worlds where you can, I'm going to say something bad, you can run people over with cars, right, in Grand Theft Auto, that's not, why would people engage with the world? And you've got to find a good answer, right, for that if you believe that people won't wind up just spending all their time doing idealized things or things that they can't do in the real world. Those are a lot more fun. They're easy, right? Skateboarding in the real world is hard. Skateboarding in Tony Hawk is easy. And so people are like, oh, I'm going to pick up skateboarding because I played a lot of Tony Hawk. This story just happened to me. I've been skateboarding at the Old Fourth Ward. It's really hard to skateboard in real life. It's really easy to skateboard in video games. I was like, yeah, that is true. And then so you just retreat, right? You imagine, right, people retreating back to things that are easy.
You know what, Zach, just to add on to that too, I think all of us just scanning the room age-wise, right? We almost kind of have a blind spot a bit for those millennials, and then whatever the younger generation are, it's already blurred. There's no distinction too much. A quick story, we were on the back of a bus with a bunch of middle schoolers and young high schoolers, so whatever, 13 to maybe 16, and they were texting one another. I'm like, dude, what's going on? You're texting one another, you're just standing right next to there, talk. But they said, oh, no, we're texting here, but there's also our friends we want to include in the conversation that are digital friends that are not there. So it's already, it's blurred, it's done, right? They're connecting physically and digitally with everybody in that inclusive sort of millennial, post-millennial sort of thing.
Is it bad? I assumed you were going to say they were excluding other people on the bus.
No, it was
we're texting.
Inclusive. It was awesome.
We don't want channel here.
Yeah. That was my, it was me, Mr. Xer guys, oh yeah, they're excluding the bad people. But no, it was totally inclusive with everybody into the conversation.
I'm just curious, a friend of mine has a Google Watch, and another friend of mine has an Apple Watch. And those two things work with those two different types of, inside their walled gardens. My nieces and nephews just went to Walt Disney World and loved their magic bands that they got to do absolutely everything with at the park, and it even lit up in time with the music and a fireworks show. But that only works at Walt Disney World. Can we get to a place where all of these devices play nicely with each other? Or will we all have to live in Apple land or Google land?
Well, I mean, this has always been the dream. Anybody that's tried to get their home theater to work, but I think that people's like willingness to put up with that is going to wear thin. When you talk about wearables and when you talk about Internet of Things, stuff has got to start working better. The problem is every company thinks, okay, yeah, you're right, it should work better. We'll use our stuff, and everyone should adopt it. I don't know. I mean, that's a very
But that's happened on hardware for like decades.
Right,
With
yeah.
USB and all these other
Right,
things.
yeah.
It took years to develop, RAID,
Mhm.
SCSI, and things like that.
Yeah.
But we all think we want that, but is that Skynet? Do you really want that?
I do want Skynet in my car.
Is that what it's going to take though? Like all companies working together in one cloud, or we all?
Well, like for me, the scary part is how all the data just becomes like more and more aggregated. Google just acquires a company, and I had a drop cam, and then suddenly it became Google's Nest, and I think about all what Google already knows about me, and now they get a constant video stream from my daughter's bedroom, like where I'm talking about who knows what and doing who knows what, and so. Yeah, the downside of this, everything works together, or there's one monolithic company that then they know a lot about you. It's really hard for you to kind of silo different parts of your existence into different.
Won't we all be dead soon?
Well, I thought tomorrow the world's supposed to end, according to some. Yeah.
Won't we all be dead soon? And all the young people that grew up without privacy, it won't be a big deal to them.
One of my theories, there's a book called, what is it called? The City in the City or something like that. And there are two cities that are physically co-located, like interleaved. And the residents of one city just pretend not to see the buildings and the residents of the other city. Like they're physically right there, but it's just, you just learn to not see them. And I kind of see that happening like with my students at Georgia Tech, that it used to be that you'd hear, oh, well, don't post it on Facebook because you won't get a job or something. And I think it's kind of different now. It's like, if I see something compromising on Facebook, I might think to myself, well, that was them in their like leisure time. That was them at Dragon Con. This is them at work. And those are kind of, and I can see that coming to the extreme where this gets back to my constructing identity. Like, if you meet me at Dragon Con, you're like, oh, this is Mary Beth cosplaying as Pikachu, and then here's Mary Beth at this panel being a professional, and those are like different people, and you don't let one influence your view of the other.
I just saw a comment about that. There was somebody interviewing someone, and they were like reading a tweet from 5 years before, and it was basically like, oh, so you get your purple ink on, and you do whatever it was, right? It was hilarious.
Yeah.
Too risque.
And if everyone's skeletons are out of the closet like that, then we don't have any basis to judge. So maybe we'll all just kind of be more accepting of everybody's.
Netflix and chill.
I'm curious to hear you guys' thoughts on the policy implications of this. I'm thinking about some work that colleagues of mine at University of Michigan did. It was with people with disabilities in developing countries, and they were sort of proposing this theory about how by definition, literally become cyborgs, because there's cases like if you think about women in certain areas, they can't go out of the house without their phone because they're afraid that they might get kidnapped or raped. And it's a serious problem. So they're talking a lot about how particularly people with disabilities who depend really heavily on things like their phones just to go about their everyday life, how that has serious policy implications. And now it's also becoming a way to control these people in a different way. It's sort of empowering them at the same time as it's creating this whole new avenue for governments and people with access to all of this data and control over the hardware and the software to just control them in totally different ways. So I'm curious if any of you might.
So I think it has big implications, and I don't know what they all are, but I'll just share some open thoughts. So especially in the analytics, or talking about big data and analytics. So anytime you go on a website, you're getting tracked, right, through one of the analytics companies. So it might be Google Analytics or Omniture or Click-Through, whatever it is. And there's a company that owns that site. They're gathering data about you, and they're using that data. As a test. They learn, they measure, and then they learn, and then they iterate on their site and make it better to try to get people to conform to the behavior that they want you to conform to. We do the same thing with our physical experiences. So if we install a responsive environment in a store or in a museum, we test and measure it over time through instrumented intelligence. So we might do that by measuring sort of traffic flow and heat map, or how many people actually stood in front of this installation versus that one, what time of day, If it's a Connect experience or an experience using a camera, we can even start to get into how many female versus male age and stuff like that. I don't think we've actually done that yet, but we can. But we get into we do look at glances. How long did you glance at it? Did you look at it? Were you engaged? Were you smiling? Or did you just kind of look and walk by? All that's data that we're using to educate ourselves so we can then iterate on the experience and make it better and make more people use it. Now I wonder, once we have this, when we start to have, let's say it just settles out and we end up with 2 watches, right? And so it's very easy to collect all the data. There's only 2 data sets, and you start to add biometric data to that, and I know how you're feeling, and I can respond to it instantly. I think there's big implications in that, because then you're starting to talk about not really influencing people, but you're able to manipulate them on the fly, right? And do you really want someone to measure how you're feeling and they're responding based on that? Like, do you want them peering into you that much? I don't know if I do, right? So I think there are big implications, and there's big questions and there's issues that haven't popped up yet, but they're going to.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One is, I think accessibility becomes even more and more important, because as these computing devices become more critical to getting along in our society and having a job and being connected with people and existing in our world, then we have to think about accessibility. And computers, when they were columns of text and the command line, they were way more accessible to people that are vision impaired, because you could use a screen reader and just read the text. As soon as we went to a GUI, it became way less accessible. When the smartphones started coming out, we went away from having actual buttons to this flat piece of glass. That becomes inaccessible to a lot of people. And similarly, if we're going to be rolling out all this wearable technology, probably a lot of companies, their first thought isn't, well, how does a 90-year-old person use this? How does somebody with a vision impairment use this? And you could very quickly end up with people left behind, not able to really fully engage in society because they're not able to use this stuff. But then kind of on the flip side, so there's an example of one of the first real cyborgs. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's colorblind, and he has a camera physically connected to the back of his head that sonifies, it's like a camera, and it's sonifying the color information for him. So it's kind of this artificial synesthesia. So he can overcome his color blindness by listening to this camera feed. But it's physically attached to him. And as you can imagine, when he goes to the airport, TSA was not very pleased with this. And I think there was actually a legal battle where he got it declared that that is part of him. And so his passport photo, he has this thing attached to his head. This technology is now part of his being. So there's a lot of interesting questions there, again, about what are you allowed to use in terms of technology? What are you required to use? Can people make you turn things off or take them off? And so that's a whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah, I think the panel's about wearables, but then you've got implantables, which is a whole separate new class of both medical device, but also of just non-medical, right, in that case.
For head-mounted displays, things like Oculus, I can use them for about 15 minutes, and then I get horrible motion sickness. Is that being worked out, or am I going to have no TV when I need it?
Well, the problem is it's really due to the disconnect between what your inner ear is sensing and then what your eyes are seeing. So the better the tracking gets, the less that's reduced, because what needs to happen is when you move your head this way, the visuals immediately respond. But that is part of the problem. Nobody wants to wear a head-mounted display for longer than 10 minutes.
An hour with breaking news.
Right. That's one of the issues. The resolution is not very high. The field of view is narrow. They're heavy. Your nose feels like it's going to fall off after a while. I've spent 15 years trying to make people wear head-mounted displays, so I'm well aware.
I know that when you don't usually slow down for drive, I know.
Okay.
You're like, whoa. So I'm guessing is that it's related, or am I just?
Well, yeah, same sort of thing.
Because I haven't really. It feels like you've been on a boat and you're going to be sick.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know close to
Yeah, simulator sickness is. We even have standard measurements of being able to figure out whether someone's predisposed to simulator sickness and measuring what they experienced while they were in it. that's another thing I like about augmented reality. I'm not necessarily like a hater on VR, but like what's nice about AR is that you are seeing the real world, and that can be even live, not through video, but just like I'm literally seeing the real world, and so you have less of that.
How are we on time? Actually,
4 minutes.
oh, okay, well, we can have one last question. Or if you guys want to make closing statements of sorts, for things that we didn't really cover. Are there any questions? Maybe not. Do you guys have any last thoughts?
Well, you alluded to something, and that's just 3D content in general becoming more prevalent. I'm sure we will see that. Just more 3D movies. Getting using a 360 camera and video camera, you can do that now pretty easily. So I can't wait to see that used in journalism, right? And be able to see an event happen like from all angles instead of just one. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff like that.
I want to use my 30 seconds to bring the slide up because I wanted to make sure that everyone knows about the upcoming wearable computing. Oh, you have to log in.
Oh, that's more computer.
So I'm the director of this Wearable Computing Center at Georgia Tech. We're on the academic side, we bring together all the researchers around campus to tackle the grand challenges of wearable computing, and we're also the kind of external face of wearables to industrial sponsors and collaborators. So anyway, we're having our Wearable Computing Center Forum October 21st. If you go to wcc.gotech.edu, you can register. That's happening in the morning. Then in the afternoon is this huge demo showcase that will have like hundreds of demos. So if you want to see all the things going on at Georgia Tech, not just wearable computing, you can see that. And then we have a reception that night, which will be a good opportunity for like networking. And we're going to have a performance. There's a musician, and we're making him this custom wearable suit that he's going to use to control his performance. So that'll be fun. So anyway, please go check that out and come learn more about wearables on October 21st.
Great. Zach, do you have any closing? Okay, great. Well, he said they're all.
I'll bore you for, yeah.
That's fine. I think, yeah.
Bore you guys.
We covered a lot, so it was good. Well, thank you guys for coming to this session.